Let's discuss a topic that affects us all: globalization. In recent years, we have seen the world become increasingly interconnected through cross-border trade, investment, and the exchange of goods, services, and information. However, there are signs that globalization is coming to an end. To understand why this is happening, we need to first define what globalization is. Simply put, globalization is the growing interdependence of the world's economies, cultures, and populations. This has been brought about by the increasing flow of goods and services, technology, investment, people, and information across borders. Through this process, countries have built economic partnerships, resulting in the creation of a global network that is often described as a global village. But what is causing globalization to end? One major factor is the rise of nationalism and protectionism in many countries. These trends have led to a shift away from the free movement of goods, services, and people across borders, with many countries imposing tariffs and other trade barriers. Another factor is the growing divide between rich and poor, with the benefits of globalization being unevenly distributed across the world. This has resulted in many people feeling left behind and frustrated with the current system. Despite these challenges, there are still many benefits to globalization. It has brought about greater economic growth, increased access to goods and services, and improved standards of living in many countries. Globalization has also led to greater cultural exchange and understanding, which has helped to promote peace and stability in the world. So, is the end of globalization a bad thing? It depends on who you ask. For some, the rise of nationalism and protectionism is seen as a necessary corrective to the excesses of globalization, and a way to ensure that the benefits are more evenly distributed. For others, however, the end of globalization is a concerning trend that could lead to increased conflict and economic instability. The end of globalization is a complex issue that has many different factors at play. While there are certainly challenges that need to be addressed, it's important to recognize the benefits that globalization has brought about and to work towards creating a more equitable and sustainable global system. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this video informative. Don't forget to like and share, and let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Have you ever wondered about the consequences of globalization? As we know, globalization has brought countries and regions closer together, resulting in an interconnected global economy. But what happens when something goes wrong in one region and affects the whole world? One example of this is the impact of energy restrictions placed on Russia, which affected the entire globe. As a result, food prices skyrocketed, and more sanctions were placed on Russia. This highlights the challenge that comes with globalization. Certain countries and regions become so reliant on others that if something happens to one cog in the wheel, the entire system crashes and burns. The Ukrainian war is another example of how globalization can have far-reaching consequences. Even continents and territories thousands of miles away from the actual conflict can still feel its effects. This is not to minimize Ukraine's plight, but to highlight how Russia's sanctions and Ukraine's limitations affected the entire world. Now that Russia is fully immersed in this war, whichever country allies with Russia is exposed to facing the very same consequences that Russia is facing right now. Belarus is one such example. Having aided Russia in this war, the West has cut them off from global trade. But the scariest of the allies is China, who has repeatedly shown support to Russia in all but military means. Recently, Chinese President Xi Jinping traveled to Moscow to meet with Putin to discuss trade and peace, but mainly trade. China's support of Russia has been noted by the West, and China has even been threatened with sanctions if they aid Russia. U.S. President Joe Biden warned about the implications and consequences if China provides material support to Russia. China's response rejected sweeping and indiscriminate sanctions as dangerous for the world economy. As bad as the effects were that came with Russia being forcefully booted out of the globalization chat room, doing so to China would have untold ramifications. China is one of the most central players in the global economy because of its cheap labor factories and manufacturing industry. It is very hard to remove China from the global economy without exerting massive pain on everyone. The fractures are showing, and the catalysts are ready to be triggered. Geopolitics is one of the major reasons why globalization is coming to an end. With various nations aligning themselves with others, What used to be a cohesive, inclusive system of trade and partnership becomes a fractured mess that will result in individualism over team play. But that's not the only reason why globalization is facing its end. Another reason is the uneven development globally, resulting in exploitation of resources from underdeveloped countries to developed ones. This has been detrimental to the world economy and has caused Africa, for example, to export way less to China than China exposed to African countries. This uneven development is one of the reasons why globalization may be dragging America down and why it's lost its favor. Did you know that underdeveloped countries face a serious problem when it comes to developing? It's like hitting a growth cap where progress is limited and you can't go any further. Many African nations, for instance, have fallen into a debt trap with China, thanks to globalization. These deals are structured in a way that benefits the larger economies, while the poorer ones are left with scraps. The exploitation of resources in underdeveloped countries has resulted in uneven development across the globe. However, the issues with globalization are not limited to the international stage. Sometimes, the loopholes of the system are apparent within the economies themselves. The USA is a prime example of this. For instance, the country has faced a major hiring crisis, with American manufacturing workers losing 2 million jobs, a record high since 2006. Every job lost to trade with China has resulted in 150 other jobs lost by American workers. Interestingly, the average American household spends less than 3.5% of its budget on clothing and shoes today, compared to over 10% in 1960, which was equivalent to roughly $4,000 today. Back then, the average person bought fewer than 25 garments each year, with 95% of those clothes made in the United States. However, today we buy almost 3 times the amount of clothes, with only 2% made in the USA. Thanks to offshoring and globalization, this increased consumption, which could be benefiting the US, has become null and void. You can drive around industrial centers across America's eastern seaboard and the South, which have become ghost towns as factories have emptied and employees have filed for unemployment. Unfortunately, America is losing jobs to the global market, and manufacturing jobs are among the most affected due to cheap labor and materials overseas, mainly in China. Most factories in the US are closing down in favor of making products abroad, where everything is simply cheaper, saving companies millions, if not billions of dollars. While administrations like the Trump administration have tried to combat this shift by placing protective tariffs on imported goods from China, this has resulted in a trade war. As a result, China and other countries with such advantages are looking to consolidate them further. In the pursuit of endless profits, globalization and capitalism have directly led to suppliers in the US looking overseas for cheaper manufacturing, leaving millions of Americans jobless. This problem isn't just limited to the US. Most European nations face similar challenges. In a way, globalization, particularly in America, has become the thief of domestic jobs. To put it into perspective, globalization has had its days, and its negative effects are fast catching up. If you're interested in learning more, stay tuned for our upcoming videos. Please subscribe and like to our channel for more.